Good morning, gentle women, good afternoon, gentlemen, and also good evening, gentle children, although I'm not sure why you are awake this late. Today we have a no camera Tuesday, mostly because I made a mistake, and you will see tomorrow the kind of mistake that has been done. Anyways, on this Tuesday we are going to be talking about something related to misconceptions, urban legend, what you heard of once from the niece, of the cousin, of the mother, of the grandma, that you still repeat to this day as if it is common knowledge. This argument came by as I was thinking about some cool things to talk about in a video. This was related to how the situation in this meta, in terms of the progression of the power, of the popularity of the specs in both the raid but also in Mythic Plus. So how have the specs evolved in the past couple of months in terms of performance, things like you're able to pinpoint throughout the season the exact moments where, for example, the mage specs get buffed, so fire mage grows in power over time. You can also pinpoint things like assassination losing over time, starting up pretty high, and then sort of getting outscaled, getting a slight nerf as well, getting towards the bottom over time. And these type of thoughts, both from a Mythic Plus perspective, but also a raid perspective. So I got to think about the general consensus of the player base when talking about the specs that are generally known to be OP, generally known to be somehow, some way, always finding a way to sneak in the meta, to sneak in the more popular options, the more popular picks, whether it is the raid or if it is Mythic Plus. They always end up one way or another towards the more popular. Because, as mentioned, some players might be misremembering or might be actively going the wrong way on purpose on who in general has been a very powerful pick, a very powerful option and choice season in, season out of this expansion ever since Mythic Plus was released, for example, in Legion. This one is, for example, your Mythic Plus title breakdown over the different seasons, starting from 7.2 of Legion, when the data started being tracked properly. You have your breakdowns of all the classes and the popularity of all of the classes at a very, very high level. And we are stopping right before this season with the abomination that was Dragonflight Season 2, with the creation of the Exodia composition. Now, the first thing you notice, maybe you were actually having your stocks put on Mage. Perhaps some hipster might have even had them on Warlock or even Hunter. Actually, the number one, the absolute clear number one in terms of average presence in the meta has been Rogue. Rogue beats out last minute Mage due to their massive dominance in BFA in the first three, but in general all of BFA, but in particular the first three seasons. These were seasons where Rogue was so popular, one of the standard composition was running double Rogue as a DPS, not just one, but two. Because of this very last season where Rogue was basically not present, the one who actually wins in terms of stable season by season presence is Mage. Because as you can see, Mage has been present, at least to a degree, in every single season. Basically, the absolute worst of the Mage presence in top keys in Mythic Plus has been 5.9%. And that was their most terrible result. Now compare this, for example, with something like Priest. Shadow Priest had to wait a grand total of 6 years before getting better than 5.9%. Since the introduction of Legion, they had to wait all the way down to the first season of Dragonflight before they got to do better than a Mage, than the worst season of Mage. Same for Rogue. The worst season overall for Rogue has been this one, this Dragonflight Season 2 of a couple of months ago, where Rogue was at just 2%. Prior to that, their worst was 6.5, which Shaman only ever beat in Season 1 of Dragonflight after 6 years of Mythic Plus. Priest also beat after 6 years of Mythic Plus. Rat Paladin ironically only beat them on Legion's second patch, and then never again for 7 years. And this was the worst season of Rogue. We can be even meaner. We can be even more mean and say that the worst ever season of Rogue and the worst ever season of Mage are actually better than the best seasons ever of a DPS Death Knight. Hunter might even join the fray if it wasn't for Season 2. If it wasn't for Season 2 up to Dragonflight Season 1, even the worst season of Hunter was still ahead of many other specs for multiple years. We have gotten now 1, 2, 3, 4.5, almost 4 full expansions worth of Mythic Plus in a situation where we have had Shaman DPS never meta in a season of Mythic Plus. Even this one, which was the best meta of a Shaman, which was Enhancement Shaman, was still not even in the top 4 of most played specs in Season 1 of Dragonflight. Then you had Warrior, DPS Warrior, even if they did have multiple decent positions in the meta, they were once more never in the top 5, basically top 5 or top 3 of picks in Mythic Plus. Then you have DK, as mentioned, never been meta. You had the Red Paladin, also never been meta. You had Shadow Priest, only meta for the last couple of Dragonflight's seasons. The other hybrid DPS who breaks the mold despite only having one choice to pick from, Windwalker. They can't go amongst 3 options like Rogue or Warlock or Mage or Hunter. They only have one pick. Windwalker was meta at times. This one was already better in terms of number than specs like Warrior or DK or Paladin throughout the years, but then also Shadowlands. Season 2 of Shadowlands and even Season 3, even though it was more dominated by what you remember being Destro and Survival Hunter, still also had often many Windwalker monks. And the one with the most up and downs, the one with the more volatile seasons is actually Demon Hunter. Many might have this idea that Havoc has been OP and a Blizzard's favorite for a long time, but actually not really. Even in their expansion release, where you expect the new shiny spec to be made OP by Blizzard to get players to play the whole class, Havoc and also Vengeance weren't actually that strong. Havoc was not one of the main picks in Mythic Plus in Legion. It became the main pick in Mythic Plus for the entirety of the expansion of BFA, but then quickly, just as they came into BFA super high, they entered Shadowlands super low, and they continued to be terrible for the entirety of Shadowlands, and now we have Dragonflight where they are in a better position again. So they have the more up and down of the results throughout the seasons of Mythic Plus actually goes to Havoc when it comes to DPS choices. This is mostly to just highlight the situation in the meta right now compared to the previous expansions, the previous seasons, where talking about a potential title fight, a potential top level finishes by the specs, by DPS specs, in this season of Mythic Plus, we do see some familiar faces in the possible high numbers. Mage would not be a surprise, Rogue would not be a surprise, Havoc continues the good expansion after Season 1 of Dragonflight, and even Demoloch. At this point, unfortunately, after Season 2, we wouldn't be surprised at the high number of augmentation either. So we don't really have any of the usual suspects for being quite low in popularity at the very high level historically in Mythic Plus to have a surprise season, because Windwalker seems like they won't really get to have any high results this season. Same goes for DK, both Unholy and Frost, of course. Definitely goes for Shadow Priest, for Warrior, for both of the Shaman specs, for Hunter. It's also gonna be the same thing. The closest one of the low representation specs and classes historically in Mythic Plus might be Ret. You know, assuming they continue to grow from this 4% and that this latest afflicted week wasn't just a fluke, they might have more room, more window for high finishes in the title level keys in this season compared to where they historically finish up as a spec. Since the average of Red Paladin getting titles is around 3% in a season of Mythic Plus. So any higher than that would already be a start, a positive thing for Ret. It's also unlucky that these numbers are getting squeezed more and more after the introduction of Evoker, the introduction of Augmentation, essentially stealing away percentages of titles week after week in both Season 2 and now Season 3. So it's gonna make the overall number of all of the other specs smaller at the end of this season. But this is the situation so far in terms of the meta state of the DPS specs in Mythic Plus compared to where they usually end up at the end of the season, going back, 6+ years since the release of Mythic Plus in Legion. Some of these are not very surprising and continue to be the most popular earners of Mythic Plus titles like Mage and Rogue. Some others continue to be up and down, sometimes getting title level keys, sometimes being terrible like Havoc Demon Hunter, but also this expansion Hunter as well as Balanced Druid. Balanced Druid ended up being a title earning spec in 6 seasons out of 14 of Mythic Plus. Hunter ended up being a title earning spec in 7 seasons out of 14 in Mythic Plus, but this time around looks like there will be some low earners in this season 3 of Dragonflight, and others continue, unfortunately, not to surprise, as they typically don't get to be in this level of high keys. From DKs to warriors to wingwalker to shamans, this seems to be the trend still in this season as well. That's it for today's update on the historical level of popularity, of presence of different classes in terms of very high level title earning picks in the meta of Mythic Plus. Hoping I have not further depressed any of you playing some of these underrepresented specs, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your Tuesday. Reset day in NA and soon to be reset day in EU with the balance tuning changes coming in this season 3. We are now going to leave each other on this Tuesday by thanking first, of course, all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and help to the growth of the channel, which can, as usual, also be given completely for free by liking and commenting down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I have made a mistake waking up so early. Now I am in the weird position where I have to go to sleep halfway through the day or get really sleepy later on.